Welcome to eluukkanen stream. My name is eluukkanen, and today we are going to have a very fascinating interview about a composer who has been able to grow very substantially and really get a foothold in this day and age when algorithms, everything around is very much against you from the very start. His name is Matti Paalanen, CelestialAeon, aka, and well, we're going to discuss about his music career. We're going to ask about what kind of insight knowledge he might have for new composers who are very much interested to make this as their career, perhaps in the future. We are going to have that. So,
here's a question.
Hello, Matti Paalanen. How are you doing?
Hello, and
how's your day going?
Fine, thank you. And my day has been pretty well, pretty okay.
That is lovely.
I'm definitely glad to be here and glad for this opportunity and this interview. I appreciate it.
I'm very fascinated to have an interview with you. I have messaged you sometimes, but I have not heard you about these questions we are going to now ask here on the interview right now. So without further ado, let's get into the question of the day, which is basically, can you tell something about yourself to people who are currently watching the stream?
Yeah, well, basically, I'm a, let's say, hobbyist composer, but getting more serious about it, like every year. And back in the day, I began building my home studio, which is PC-based. I think it was year 2005, maybe. So almost 15 years ago. And back in the day, the technology was totally different from these days. So the sound that I managed to output back then was crude.
It must have been different.
But it was crude. And well, music has been an important thing in my life, like since the beginning. But I never really thought about it like professionally. I always thought that it's just an important hobby for me. Yeah, and I guess it's partially because in Finland there's just so many good musicians. So I thought that it wouldn't be really realistic back in the day to find your place in the business, so to speak. And hence I've basically had like two lives: my normal day-to-day job life, and then this music life, which has always been just a hobby. Eventually, the internet sort of like allowed me to start thinking about it like more and more. And let's say that this is the first year when I finally start to think like, could I become more like just a composer instead of like a day-to-day something else. But yeah, we'll see.
That is very fascinating to hear. So essentially you mean that your career for this point on, it has been this sort of that it has been a very much hard road for very first years you have done this, trying to reach the numbers and see the opportunities. So in the beginning it was not that serious.
Yeah, definitely. And usually it tends to be that there are things that are happening which you can't really control or predict.
That is very true.
Originally, back in the day, my main point was just to create music, and just for myself, I guess. But I started to think that if I create the music, I just want to put it out there.
What kind of music do you create for people who don't know you?
Yeah, mostly I focus on this kind of fantasy-themed soundtrack music, I guess. So music has been always an important aspect of my personal listening habit, and I could say that I'm a both computer and role-playing geek. So it's natural for me to focus on.
So a natural fit to make that kind of music.
Yeah, definitely. And originally I thought that some of the tunes might be useful for my own RPG campaigns as a background music or something.
So you have like a D&D experience.
Yeah, definitely. I actually got my original Dungeons and Dragons red box in the 80s.
Oh, that is. Oh, I'm a big fan of that. Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah,
That is very lovely.
It was like the very like first time that you could get like a
And you
RPG
put
in
music to that kind of combination to RPG.
Yeah, because our group of players, we have always used background music in our games. I don't know where we got the idea, but it has been like really good way to like create atmospheres and emphasize the scenery. So we have like more ambient kind of music for like scenes where we are in forests, and then like epic battle themes for battle scenes and so on. So
and
in
original
ways,
stuff.
I think that this kind of music works really well in outside of film context as well, because it's background music. So whatever you are doing, it might be relevant to have background music. But yeah.
Of course. So that was the kind of the beginning notion. So did you make music before that, or was the music the first music you did for these campaign works you did?
Well, I think it was the first thing that I did on computer. So
right.
Before that, I mainly had like these. I play guitar and I play piano, so I had some like band projects or like live gigs. But when I started building that home studio, I from the very first moment I realized that I would really want to make this kind of music with my computer instead of like that band thing.
Yeah, band music or anything else. Yeah. I see.
And I have to say that one of the most important sort of like things that got me on this road was back in the day when Baldur's Gate got released, and it had like this amazing soundtrack by Michael Hoenig.
Baldur's Gate. So that's kind of very much D&D like a game in essence.
Yeah. It was the first like massive computer RPG that really got this like big budget, and
it's still known even today.
Back in the day, because when it was published, it was like 5 or 6 CD-ROMs, which is like insane amount of data back in the day, because usually CD, and then you have this like game that had 6. So basic install of the game was like, whoa, what is this?
Yeah, back in the day, if people don't remember, we had many CDs, no internet connection, just CDs in the computer, and hopefully that would install it.
I remember that I had to like maybe buy a new hard drive just because I didn't have enough space or room for the Baldur's Gate install. So,
but I just yes, the music was something that inspired you.
Yeah. And I remember that I had this like thought in my head that, okay, maybe it's possible to create something like this with home studio. And that was sort of like the quest that I enrolled on. So
this is very much something
to find out that
this is very much, but the fact that, I just want to say to people who are currently joining the stream, thank you for coming here and watching. We are currently interviewing a CelestialAeon, Matti Paalanen, who is this composer guy that, just looking at this current day, he is very much going forward. If you look at this YouTube channel, he has been really able to, get that good go forward, and he's really, how do you say in America, kicking it, really doing the good work in that. So I just want to tell you that this background he's telling to you, and for the people who are composers in our channel and watching this, it might be really, really fascinating to to see that kind of beginning you had, role-playing music and game music. But the great question is, what was the big there's always, if you look at composers, this kind of like the big essential thing that kind of like put you forward to limelight, and people started really like finding you and stuff. What was that first initial step to online, that people know you online?
Yeah, it's a good question, and of course it can be usually that you have like a couple of different things, and maybe they are going on at the same time, and you only afterwards realize that all of those affected like a lot. And I think that in my case, one of the most important things was because in addition to Baldur's Gate, Jeremy Soule has been one of my also.
I like him as well. Yeah, good composer.
And back in the day when Morrowind was released, which was like a predecessor of Skyrim, and it already had Jeremy Soule's like wonderful soundtrack. I remember when I started playing Morrowind, I had this feeling that I'm only looking for that next exploration too, instead of like playing the game. And the thing about Morrowind was that already Morrowind had like this editor thing, and it already started to build
it did
mod community, and I think that it was one of the first games that really made that mod community thing a big thing, and even now you can have like Morrowind mods going on because people are still working on that.
So you say you have this kind of so these mods that you were able to get your music to mods. This was a big thing.
Yeah, because it was not Morrowind but Oblivion,
right,
with which I got the idea that maybe there is point in creating an extra music mod for the game, because I personally thought that however beautiful the original soundtrack is, it's still so like there are so few tunes that when you play a game like tens of hours, you start to feel that it's already looping the same tune.
Yes, indeed,
and
indeed.
I thought that there was some kind of idea in the there that it might be reasonable to extend the original soundtrack.
I see your point. You know, if you play that game a very long time, there comes this point that it's just the music's very repetitive at some point. So you made music for Morrowind mod. What kind of mod was that?
And, well, I initially released 5 different mods, and they were like battle music mod and exploration music mod and whatnot. And back in the day, there was this Elder Scroll Nexus, I think.
Yeah, it's still on, yeah. So that's kind of like a mod website for people who don't know.
Yeah. And the thing about those mod websites, nowadays you have Steam Workshop and so on. But the main thing about those mod sites is that they have pretty good like search options, and they have pretty good like popularity lists. So I thought that if I managed to get popular mod out there, it would give like good visibility to my music, because if it happens that the mod is presented in the front page of Nexus,
very clever way.
A good like volume that you get, good visibility that you get without paying anything. It's just that you create good quality stuff that people are wanting to use and look for, and then you get it.
To already something that people are using, like Morrowind, it's a huge fan base even nowadays, or even though, you know, some better things are going on right now for the game. But I tell you, these old games, these old gems, people are still finding them, still playing them. I truly get what you say.
It's a very interesting
so I think that for an Indian musician, the main question always is that how do people find you? Because your music is out there, but nobody is looking for you. Nobody knows you are there. Nobody knows that your music is there. So that's that's the holy grail. How do people find you? How do they even know that they should find you?
That is very true.
And I don't have like really good answers, but I know that this is one way to look at it.
So for beginning composers, you may mention that might be some kind of like a gateway to find things that already people like and put your own music to that. That also it does not, of course, you know, damage the already, you know, like you don't like to put electronic music to on the background of Morrowind. You put something that would fit there. So that's what kind of like a gateway way for people to find their footing.
So I think that the main thing is that you have to understand that what's your style and what's it for. And then you start to look at it from the other perspective, that what else like resides in that realm. And for me, as it was fantasy music and it was fantasy soundtrack music, it was natural to find that, okay, Oblivion is there. It's basically the same thing, because I'm doing what Jeremy Soule is doing. So thing that you have to pick your battles. Don't try to inject your music into something that it doesn't work on, because even if people find it, they can just say that this sucks. Like I'm not looking for it.
So you have to, it has to really, you have to really know what your music is. That is actually very good point for composers, because if you are not able to even know what kind of music you yourself do and how people see you to be what kind of composer you are, it is very hard to get this kind of following you have and you try to build. My question is in that, so you made Morrowind music, and how much attraction it got for you?
I remember that the Oblivion mod actually brought immense traffic. I don't remember the exact numbers, but back in the day, the only place that I had my music on was this Finnish music site called mixeri.net, which was basically like one of the first sites that you could just upload your music on.
Like SoundCloud and that kind of website.
Yeah, like a SoundCloud predecessor. And I remember looking at the stats when I published the Oblivion mod, and it got on some of the like lists, maybe not front page, but somewhere out there. And suddenly, like the download or listen streams peaked because I had the link to my Mixerinet site, and one of my tunes from that mod, in a few weeks, became one of the most listened tunes on the whole Mixerinet.
What was the name of that song? Do you remember?
It was a song called Hope for Rebirth. And if you search for CelestialAeon project Hope for Rebirth, you can find it still. And I think that if Mixerinet site is still online, they had like this chart heaven, that if a tune that like stays on top for 4 weeks in succession, it gets to the chart heaven.
So it was listened a lot.
Rebirth is there, yeah, because it was one of the only soundtrack themed tunes that got there, because in Mixerinet nobody is listening to.
Yeah, of course in Finnish play, I get you.
So the Oblivion mods basically gave me access to chart heaven with soundtrack tune. So it was that important.
Okay.
And then I realized for the first time that I have to really think this through. That how do I use the internet?
So you got now attraction. People started to know you. So you are started to think how to really get these people now to to stay, that not just vanish away. So you had this kind of opportunity moment. What did you do?
Well, I guess that I somehow fumbled my chances back then, because this was like the year when the Oblivion got released.
2000.
I'm not sure, but
something. I'm 6'5". I don't know.
But it's an old game.
Yeah, it is.
And back in the day, I think that YouTube was just like coming something, and
it was very small. Yeah, YouTube was not really big thing.
Yeah. You always have like this, when you look back, you realize that there are mistakes. But back in the day, you don't know that you are making mistakes. But now I know that my mistake was that I should have created my music channel already then, and I should have started doing what I do now. Because
how come?
I think that the main difference between, for example, soundtrack music channels that are really popular in YouTube now, and soundtrack channels that are like starting now, I think that the main difference is that back in the day when YouTube was just like becoming something, it had so little material that the only guys who had fantasy music back then sort of like had the free publicity, because back then input into the search field that fantasy music or Celtic
they could find their music in there, because they were the only guys having the music there.
There was no competition, and you didn't even have to think about SEO, like
your search engine optimization and stuff. Yeah.
There and the search gives you. So
very true.
I think that the main thing is that whenever you can be in the very the first
beginning phase, something that can really grow.
Yeah, you have to write it, even if you don't know if it happens. Because there are all the
very good advice.
All the time there are things happening, but you don't know if it becomes big or not. But my point is that you have to take the chance, because
sometimes, yes.
The only thing that if you don't take the chance at all, some of those things will become the YouTube, and then 10 years later you're banging your head against the wall thinking of
why didn't I be there? Yeah, I totally get what you say. because those people who joined before, sorry for interrupting, people who joined like 2009 and stuff, they were the guys who were starting, you know, the big YouTubers in gaming, big YouTubers in vlogging, and also in music as well, like Adrian and other guys, you know, who are very big in fantasy and music like you do as well. But my question is, so you were on this kind of that you did not create a YouTube channel back in the day, but so you say it was kind of like a mistake on your part, but now you made a channel, you started putting music. So how was the situation? How has it changed?
It has changed in ways that it's a constant like struggle to find ways to somehow be visible, because I think that nowadays YouTube is so competitive.
Very much.
No matter what the niche is, what the genre is, that there are no good ways to in any way guarantee that your video will be shown and found. So I think that the only thing that I'm currently going for is sort of like consistency, and also sort of like publishing volume, I guess, like the speed. That you have to
Volumes?
dish out videos, like you have to.
A lot
you
of
have
videos.
To have like a really, and you have to build your channel video by video, bigger and bigger, and have like bigger portfolio. Thinking that okay, I publish one big video in 2 months, and then I hope that it will like gain me subscribers or whatnot. It's quite presumable that it won't work, because you will sort of like get disappointed when you see that okay, nobody's watching my video and I put 2 months to it. So I guess that in the modern day internet, no matter what you're doing, you have to find sort of like balance between speed and quality. And for me, it's like that balancing act that I want to put out music fast, because I have no guarantee that any of my tunes will be hits in any way. But if all of my tunes bring something, then I have to just make a lot of something that brings something, and then it adds up.
I see your strategy.
So it's you can have like two strategies, and my strategy so far is that I have to rely on making a lot of good material instead of making very little high quality material.
So is it that
it doesn't guarantee anything? Yeah.
Like that is very interesting. What you say? You said many things on that. Very vital stuff. Like as the platform, the beginning of the platform. You should sometimes, if there's a big platform starting to grow, you should be perhaps sometimes jumping on. And if you don't jump on, you know, it's very hard road going forward. But you know, you also mentioned that it is very competitive market right now. You know, composers are sharing their songs all the way, you know, listen my song for free here, everybody's on the Facebook, social media, everything. It is a hard struggle. However, you know, even this situation is very hard for everyone. I've seen some of your recent videos, like, you know, well, recent, you know, like, let's say like 1 year or few months, they have been able to really substantially grow to like 40,000 listens. And my curiosity is very much on the fact that, do you know if you have like a video, let's say you make this kind of, that you have many videos coming on, and then one video really, like, you think, okay, this might be the one that grows, but is it very surprising to you for the ones that actually grow, these big ones? Is it very much a chance thing?
At least for me, it seems to be very much like a chance thing, because I can't see a lot of difference between the videos when it comes to like the content, like what images I'm using, what kind of quality the basic music is, what kind of tags I'm using, and so on. So I think it's mostly about a complex combination of things that I can't really control, like the moment in time when I publish the video. Is there some kind of algorithmical thing going on that for some reason or other just pushes that concept that I'm tagging, like at that moment, somehow to the search visibility better than before? Or
I see.
And also that what happens to be the places that I manually try to link my video to, be it a Facebook group or like subreddit of some kind. Sometimes it just happens that certain subreddit can be in a good spot so that the link there get upvotes and then it gets to the subreddit front page or whatnot. So they're like a but if
so you say it's kind of like a hard yep. Yes.
Yeah, if you try that on the next video, it just gets 2 upvotes and then that's it. So
all right.
You can't really say that there is no point putting it into the subreddit because you got 2 upvotes. But the point is that statistically,
there is a chance.
One video in 10 gets that good push. So
I think that is very good point, because many composers, if they share those places, they might have this kind of thing that, okay, you know, nobody's liking my music, I shouldn't be posting to these places. Before I go from this, I tell you, hello and people who are coming to the stream and watching. Currently we are interviewing Matti Paalanen, CelestialAeon. He has had very interesting points on the fact that, you know, how should, you know, of course, his career and how he has, you know, started, and perhaps we're going to also talk about his future, of course. But you know, he very much discussed on these kind of problem points I see for many young composers, like, you know, just having these platforms, perhaps not jumping then on the right time, and also not perhaps taking that luck chance, which might even be small, but if that luck chance goes really good, then, you know, looking at, you know, Matti Paalanen and his stuff, he is really killing it right now. Looking at, you know, as a very not very new but still rather small composing channel, looking at the bigger ones, he's really growing quite quickly, and I have to really, like, that's why I wanted to interview him and ask him these questions, and he has been so far saying very fascinating stuff. My question for the next part is going to be very much on, of course, you mentioned, you know, the YouTube success, but how is your strategy otherwise? Is the YouTube your main focus right now? As a composer, people think, you know, what should be the main focuses? Should they be releasing to Spotify, or just focusing on YouTube, or working on other projects? What has been your strategy on, of course, your life situation right now, and what is the strategy going forward?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think that the one thing about the internet is that it's really dynamic and things change all the time. And if you think like Spotify, it didn't even exist like 10 years ago or something. So you have to all the time sort of like juggle around with the ideas that where are we going to be in 5 years? Does Spotify still exist at all? And
you know, places like SoundCloud and YouTube even.
But that's a even. But no matter what the future brings, I think that each day you just focus on the things that at least now feel like substantial.
And what are those things to you?
Yeah, I have to say that so far YouTube is not actually my main thing because it's still so small. So I try to build it, and I hope that it will get somewhere.
It is going really good, I think.
For YouTube to be like a substantial thing, you have to have like tens of thousands of subscribers.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I'm still very far from that level, but we'll see. But Spotify is actually sort of like main thing currently.
How come?
And I know that many musicians think that to really like make Spotify reasonable, you have to have like really high streaming volume, and that's true. But the point is that Spotify can bring substantial streaming like volume, but it's not easy and it's not guaranteed. But I think that the same thing applies to Spotify, that what I was talking about a moment ago, that you can't really have a good career on Spotify with just like one release.
It has to be multiple ones, people follow them. I get you.
Or you have to have like really excellent luck, because the only way to make one release work is to have the Spotify, for some reason or other, take one of your tunes and put it to the biggest official.
Or people who have this the playlist. Yeah, indeed, those ones. If you get your song there, it's big listens. Yeah.
But there is no way, because the competition there is already so insane. Like they get probably tens of thousands of releases every day. So why would the Spotify curator happen to pick one of your tunes to the playlist?
Yeah, I totally get what you say.
It's like a lottery. Yeah.
It is. I'm going to just jump here and say, you mentioned about one single release strategy, and perhaps this strategy you have, that you have many songs on the way. So that is how you do it, I presume. But my question is, how would you see the difference on, should composers who are coming to this scene, which is very brutal, very competitive, what kind of tips you would give them in that kind of music releasing order, even because of course as you say, sometimes these kind of things, sharing in Spotify, sharing in YouTube, they are partially luck based. But if you have this kind of idea of working on a single release, very much building it up, or you experience on working on many songs all the time, what you see as benefits on both of those aspects, and what should you recommend on composers who are jumping on this scene right now?
Well, for me at least, the tactic that has been giving pretty good results is the idea of sort of finding that kill your darlings kind of thinking. That because for me at least, it was easy to go to studio and work on a project for hours upon hours and go to details and eventually feel that this is not good enough. I'm not going to publish this. And you have tens of hours spent on a project, and you're never going to even bounce it from the Cubase. And that's
very
the
common
problem. That's the problem, because you're not getting anywhere, and you are only feeling miserable because you feel that I suck.
Yeah, you use a lot of time and then no results. Yeah.
But what I've found is that I have to quit thinking like that. And the only thing that's important is that if the tune in the concept that you are working on is good enough, then you release it, and then you let the listeners decide that do they listen to it or not. And often the fact is that 80% of the listeners that are your potential listeners that listen to the genre that you're working on, they like it. If it's good enough, they like it, because
I see.
I think that the matter is that for a musician to analyze a tune, the bar is higher, because
of course.
we spend so much time with
on the technicalities, on every single detail.
Yeah, whatever. But for a normal listener, most of who are not musicians, they don't care that much.
Yeah, that is true.
They just listen to tunes that are good enough,
and they like it. Yeah, that is very true. So was it that how did that discovery happen? Because you said you worked on for 10 hours for this Cubase project, and there perhaps it didn't go anywhere. But what forced you to change, and what was the realization?
I think it was sort of like a pretty random occurrence, but 4 or 5 years ago, I just got this idea that I want to try and focus on royalty-free stock music for 1 year. I found these Audio Jungle and Pond 5 and these.
There are many ones of those. Yes.
Sell simple.
For people who don't know about Audio Jungle, and those are basically if let's say a project want to use your music, they pay royalties and you get the royalties and the platform get the royalties. Basically those kinds of places. So you have kind of went into that. How and why?
I made a challenge to myself that I want to see if I can sort of make it on this stock music market, and I got this inspiration that I want to try and create music that I don't normally do. So I did this kind of play thing that I decided that okay, today I'm going to make dubstep, and then I go to Audio Jungle and search for dubstep and see that what has been selling this past month. then I analyze the first 5 tunes.
So you're really going into analyzation.
If I want to make a dubstep tune that sells, I need to have that element and this instrumentation and this instrumentation, and now I have to learn how to make that in Cubase. And the only way to make this work is that I don't spend 10 hours. I have to make a finished tune in like 1 or 2 hours at most. So
that is fascinating.
Sort of like it forced me to think different.
So this environment, this kind of thing you had, it forced you to work very fast.
Yeah, I defined my sandbox and defined my limitations, and then I just made a decision that I have to work like this. And eventually it sort of worked because I got pretty good sales on Audio Jungle with really random tunes, like really stupid jingles.
Well, my question is, so you mentioned Audio Jungle. I have seen that you now work on Jamendo. We of course, have you what places you prefer and such. But so Audio Jungle has been one that has made good, with your music.
Yeah, I think that the royalty-free scene has become more competitive, like in the past years. So I wouldn't maybe try to work on it now, but back in 2015 or so, it was still pretty okay.
It was.
This is one of these things, once again, that...
Man, I have had that. I was like 2015-14. Man, I should go to royalty-free music, and I did not. And, it was a big mistake. Because I tell you, I know some guys. They make 10,000 in a month with that kind of stuff. It is really good. But now, as you said, is it competitive? How come?
So many musicians coming all the day, and there's also like this systemic problem that I'm not sure if they have changed that, but I think that there started to become like these sort of like fake accounts that they copycat straight other tunes or duplicate their own tunes but release them under different accounts, so they like flood the market
with the same song. That's nasty.
So the search visibility becomes like really hard, and the owner of the marketplace doesn't really care too much about the phenomenon. So
because it's making money.
Yeah. So with any kind of business, there is always this prospect that you start to get like these hacks and phony guys, and then it's a matter of how does the marketplace itself handle that, and usually they probably even don't handle it. So there are always like the good years, and then after a certain point it starts to...
It's with everything. It what happened with SoundCloud. It happened, with platforms and of course with these royalty-free stuff as well. We're currently interviewing very interesting topics on this guy called Matti Paalanen, CelestialAeon. I recommend, after this stream, you have to go and check his work out. I think you would really like his stuff. But I tell you, of course, people who are watching right now, let me know what kind of questions would you have at the end of the stream to Matti Paalanen, what kind of questions you would have. We have comments on Visible. Currently, we are not going to answer them while we're having still the interview. But if you got any things on your mind want to ask from Matti, let us know. We're currently, he just talked about his journey from making music for Morrowind and Oblivion and even Skyrim mod, and now getting forward with royalty-free aspect on Mind, which is very fascinating. So what is that something you currently continue forward, or is that something that you might want to leave behind because you said the market has changed for that?
Yeah, I'm not currently focusing on that, and the reason is that I feel that the time and effort required to publish stuff on there and make any sales, it's getting so hard.
So it doesn't give much returns for the work you do.
Yeah, it was better back in the day, and I have this like sort of like Sun Tzu Art of War kind of thinking that you have to pick your battle and you have to pick your ground. And if you decide that this is not a good battle to be fought, then you move on and find better alternatives. And currently, for me, it feels that Spotify is maybe currently the most like that gives the best chances, at least.
I must agree on that. It has been really much growing recently. But yes, go on.
Yeah, and I think that the main thing that Spotify has going on currently is the fact that the playlists are full of potential, and Spotify is still like the stream service currently that attracts like listeners and especially the playlist game, because there are so many playlists on Spotify that have like so much followers and so much volume that if you just happen to get your tune up on few good playlists, you will gain streams.
So you would say that there's other places like Google Music and others, but you would say Spotify rises above all those.
Yeah, at least for me it has been that if I compare the different streaming revenues, Spotify is like maybe 90% of everything I get. It's from Spotify, so everything else has been like sort of pointless. But it doesn't really matter too much because most of the aggregates basically publish your tunes to all of them. So, but if you look at the analytics, at least for me, the Spotify has been the most important service, at least for now. It's interesting to see if Apple Music starts to get somewhere, because the numbers are like getting, at least in States, higher. But
that is true.
I haven't really seen the change in my own analytics yet. But yeah.
I see. So my question is, you have this kind of focus on first on you mentioned on the mod music and that sort of thing. The goal must have been for you to, see how people think and share your music forward. What is your the main focus on making the music? Because some composers, they focus on the royalty-free stuff. Some composers, they just want to put their music out there and see and get people to listen that music. Some people have that. But what is the focus on you? Because I think this is very fascinating. People look at this stream right now, they look at you, Matti, and you have been talking on royalty-free music, and then, the first, trying to get, music to these mods and get more visibility. But what ultimately is the main goal for you? Do you want to make the music thing as this main job of yours, or, just get the music out there for people to listen and enjoy?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and I think that there are always like many aspects to that question, and I don't know if I have like a single crystallized idea. I think that it also changes through time, because it's also tied to how things go and how it affects your motivation and your inspiration. In the beginning, I think that my main inspiration was just to create music that I personally like to listen to and use in my role-playing campaigns and whatnot, and sort of like hope that somebody else would like to listen to it as well. And as time went by, and I sort of like realized that there is like a listener base for this kind of music, it started to become a bit more serious, so that I started to thinking like that, what would people want to hear, and what would be a reasonable sound or a reasonable tune to produce next. So there became like this kind of more analytical way of thinking that.
Yeah, you mentioned Sun Tzu, like very much strategic. It must have been your kind of planning and such.
Yeah, and one difference between me and I guess, if not most, at least some composers, is that I tend to have like all the time this analytical thinking aspect.
I have to tell you, it's a good advice for people to have that kind of stuff. So how did you develop it?
Yeah. Well, I think that it was sort of like natural for me, because my mother is a musician and my father is a mathematician. And
good
actually,
combination.
My day-to-day job has been like programming and like
oh really?
Really this kind of. I studied at the university mathematics and computer science. So for me, it has always been a combination of this nerdy computer geek and the music. So that's why I sort of always look for this best of both worlds, kind of, that how can I bring this geeky analytical understanding of the internet to my musicianship and sort of like enhance it. And I think that this is really important thing, at least because the internet in many ways has potential all the time, but to realize it and find it, you have to live there and be an internet geek. And it's very rare to just like read something and then realize that, okay, this is what I have to do.
You have to really understand the place.
Like, you have to like just be there and spend a lot of time thinking about it and like find out that what are the things that are coming to the internet right now and what to think of them and what
follow those trends and perhaps put your music there in front of people to those trends, as people do.
And if I think back in the day, my Oblivion mod thing, there were thousands of musicians that missed it because they were not interested in computer games at all. They didn't realize that there is such a thing as Oblivion.
And usually when the potential people can see it, it's already gone, you know, that moment.
It's already gone, it's already gone. So in many ways, it's important to stay on the edge and think that what are your personal like strengths. And for me, this is one of the strengths that has helped my music a lot. So and of course, you can't really. I can't say for others that what are your strengths and what should you do.
Of course, it's individual thing. But
it's an individual thing. So I think that it's the main thing that you have to just know that what are your reasonable ways to go forward and focus on.
That is very good advice on you. I tell you, like the way you said, you know, like you had this kind of mathematician job as a side, you know, this kind of thing. It's very fascinating. I have had this this kind of talk with a composer who's also a mathematician, and how that perhaps influences you. Perhaps it does, you know, the music style you do. Of course, you mentioned your strategy. It does. Or if you want to add, does it influence much? You know, just quickly add on. Does it have a kind of like a effect on your music?
Yeah, I guess so. Because at least nowadays, when I work on a new tune, I tend to be like sort of analytical instead of like.
So not just like, hey, I have this, like, let's just go and put the music out there.
I usually like, for example, decide beforehand that, okay, I'm going to make this tune, but before I even start, I decide the instrumentation and I create my tune
so you do
template.
planning
So
a lot,
load the instruments and decide that, okay, I'm only going to use these 7 tracks, MIDI tracks with these instruments and nothing else. So I create my own limitation and sort of my.
It's
like
good
my
to
own
have
rule.
limitation, because you know if you have too much, you know, it just branches out and it does not really become
For
anything.
me, it doesn't really work. So
I've
I
seen
guess
that.
that's basically maybe something that relates to my mathematical thinking, that I need this kind of specific order or specific rules that I follow, and then I create the music. And
That is
for me, that usually works.
That for personally, I'm really intrigued on that. Of course, it's still a bit on the, you know, like I tell you, like, of course, some people might not be mathematician people. Some people might be. You know, it of course depends. I'm just, you know, you have made very good points, Matti Paalanen, on this very interview which we have done. You know, talk about what kind of strategies, how people should approach this kind of thing, and we are going to still ask few questions before we go to. You know, I really want to know what kind of a plan you have going forward, because any composer who is on this kind of long game of trying to make him or herself heard, it's good to have goals where to go. I want to first ask you this kind of a question of, when you have a composer who wants to become known. You know, you mentioned few things, you know, jumping on opportunities, but if you would have to explain in very simple terms for guy or girl who's watching this right now, this interview we have, what step, like, you know, 3 steps or something, you know, what should they do? People sometimes when they start this, it might seem a really big, scary kind of thing in front of them. What would be your best and, you know, this advice for people to just start doing it?
Yeah, I guess the main thing is that you just have to make music and publish it, and publish it in a way that is like convenient and easy. So just
For the listeners.
like for the listeners and for yourself, because I think that anything that just makes it all like work without a hassle, it makes it like a thing that you that it's easy to work on and work with. So for me, at least, it's just that okay, I have this my sequencer and I know how to create the music, and when I get the wave file, I know the aggregator I use and I publish it like with a click click click. So just decide that okay, your process of creating music is going to be this, and don't focus too much on the numbers or like that okay, what happened to your first tune, it didn't get streams. It doesn't matter. It's basically granted that when you start you won't get streams and nobody knows you, but the point is that you start to create your music, you start to publish it, and you start to build your visibility and your like composership and your projects, like the whole thing, and there is no shortcuts. If somebody tries to tell you that there are shortcuts that are guaranteed and your first tune will become a hit, don't believe them.
It's not true.
So the only way, sadly, is that you just have to grind
your way in and get people to listen.
Hence, the second point is that you have to enjoy every moment of doing it. And for me, that's the important thing. That
how can you make something enjoyable in a sense? Like, of course, we do this because it's a passion, but if someone has, let's say, like one question here is from Joe in the comments, how much free time do you have for the music creation? You know, how is the balancing going to work in for people who just really start? And, you know, what kind of processes should you recommend on really people, like if they have limited time, you have limited time, of course you work on the same time. How much time you have to work on the music and how can you make it work?
Yeah, that's a tricky question, and I guess the trouble is that it's hard to answer because it's so individual, and I guess that I personally have been quite lucky in many ways because for some reason I can create music with really tight like time span and schedule, and I can't really like
of course
it just happens to be that for me I managed to create a tune from scratch in less than 2 hours. So for me, I can just decide that this evening before I go to sleep I compose something.
It's kind of like a challenge for you to make that. Yeah.
And of course, it has been a matter of also like practice.
How many years have you done this? Just a quick question.
Well, if I started building my home studio in 2006, so a bit over 10 years already. So
14,
of course there is also an aspect of sort of like experience and whatnot. So in the beginning it didn't work as easy as it does now. Of course,
it's hard to grind in the beginning.
But there's also like this attitude and this idea that I wanted to focus on finding my own sound and my own way of creating music that sort of like helps me get it done efficiently. And one way to look at it is that some people, for example, like to work with massive templates, and they load everything. Like
every single instrument there,
hundreds of tracks, and all the possible instruments, and no matter what your machine is, it sort of makes it a bit heavy and slow.
Yeah, it does.
And with that kind of template, you can't do a tune in 2 hours. No way.
No, it slows a lot. Yeah.
So for me, it has been always the decision that I don't do that. I don't build any big templates.
So you as you said, you mentioned that you limit yourself, and that limitation gives you strength.
Yeah. So for me, the idea is that okay, I have little time. How can I make music with little time? And then I start to work on that. And instead of thinking that I can't make music in little time,
I don't have enough time to do it.
I have to find the answer that if I want to make music in little time, what do I do? and that's how you go. You work.
That is very good. As you mentioned, you had this kind of, in previously you mentioned your limitations and the fact that if you want to really, have this strategy of yours work, you have, and especially, going to royalty-free stuff, you had to make the song in 2 hours. You had to make it in 1 hour, and you had to just make it work. And it's possible if you grind enough, as you have done. And you really, like, if you look at his YouTube channel, as his Spotify and stuff, he releases really frequently on the music to CelestialAeon project. And I have to, like, so many people I have personally met in composing area, they say they don't have time. They just simply, I couldn't make it possible. But, just hearing you say it is possible if you just find a way.
Yeah. And I think that this applies to basically life itself, that we often think that we are not able to do something or something is impossible. And of course, there are always things that really are impossible and really, like, there is no way. But I think that there are lots of things all the time that we sort of like think that are impossible, but they actually are really, really, like, manageable.
And there's something perhaps that we only afterwards see that, hey, I had this kind of thing. Yeah.
And I personally think that it's a good thing to, like, every once in a while stop and, like, rethink something. Like, if you really want to do something and you have this, like, intense that you really want to do something, but you think that you can't because of one thing or another, you should, like, stop and analyze it a bit. That what am I afraid of, and is it really that, like, impossible? And what are the things that I might be able to change a little bit to make it more manageable, and maybe try it and see how it goes and whatnot. So I think that we are usually, like, before we even try, we are often, like, shooting ourselves in the leg.
You're your biggest kind of adversary in that kind of struggle. Yeah.
And this kind of attitude is I think that it's very often the main thing that
stops
sort of,
people
like,
for making anything. Yeah.
And thinking that their lives are more miserable than they could be or should be. So for me, it has been like a journey to get rid of that kind of attitude and towards this kind of I'll find a way kind of attitude. And it's always like a thing that you have to work on.
Just work on it, and
the more you do it, and the more you get this experience that, hey, I can release these tunes and I get these dreams. So it sort of, like, gives you this, like, a kick in the back that, hey, continue this road because it leads you somewhere. So
you cannot really make anything happen if you don't begin. If you don't just take the initial steps. That's what I hear from your talk.
And also this kind of this statistical thinking that if you never try, your chances are zero, and zero is zero. But if you do something, the chances are already something else than zero. And when time goes by and these repetitions starts to come, every once in a while, even a 1,000-sided dice will throw that one. So if you have something out there that participates in something that is like a statistical thing, eventually you will get your, like, chances. So you should always think that if there is something interesting going on and you want to be a part of it, just start getting something.
Try it out. It's good work. Yeah.
You will be part of it eventually. But if you never try it, you will stay out of it, and you won't be a part of it.
You don't know how good information. Like, this is so many composers I meet, I discuss. People come to me and ask, how this kind of thing does, because I myself position my channel, this kind of, like, composing channel and information and this kind of interviews we do. But like, you don't know how valuable information you just said there. At least, on my point of view, so many composers, they stop at their beginning tracks. So that, hearing that kind of being the main advice, I can see why you are currently, growing up and going forward. And whatever your future might be, where you lead, because you mentioned, you constantly change, you evolve, which is very good thing, not only focusing on one, focusing on many things. I say you, that is, a very good advice from a composer who is going forward. So, that I tell you, unfortunately our interview is coming to an end with Matti Paalanen. We are still going to have some questions afterwards on the stream. I'm going to make a video about this very good topics he mentioned about, of course, he mentioned about the D&D and how, I think that kind of connects to the fact that you mentioned the thousand-sided dice and there's still chance, you roll your dice and get the chance. But now, we are going to get the interview to the end, and we're going to still, after that, have some small questions. People can have their voices in the stream, and, we continue from that. But say goodbye to CelestialAeon, Matti Paalanen, and go to check his, either his YouTube or Spotify. Which would you recommend?
Well, if you're a Spotify user, of course, the project is there, and any follow is always appreciated.
Go and do it!
If you don't happen to have a Spotify, then the YouTube channel is like the other main thing that I usually publish everything on. So
go and have a listen. If you are a fan of fantasy music, Matti Paalanen, CelestialAeon project, he does that very, very nicely. But yes, thank you for coming to the stream, and have a good day, everyone. Wherever you are, whoever you are, I wish you a good day.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So that was the video. We're going to still go into. That was very, very good, interview on my point of view, because
Yeah, it's really fun.
You had a good time.
Yeah, definitely, and this is actually the first time that I've done anything like this, so it's
really?
actually really fun to be able to just freely roam in this concept of.
Very, very, it's very interesting to see that you haven't done this before, but I think it went really well. You made good answers, I think, on the very topics we did, and we went it in not too long, not too short. I think that's good.
Yeah.
But now, we're still going to have some questions for people that they made in the stream while they were watching. There was one very good one from Lan, a composer himself, and he asked, the Hope of Rebirth is a Celestial favorite composer. Hope for Rebirth, is that Celestial's favorite composition, or are there another ones you like? I mean, I think he mentions the compositions of yourself. Yeah,
that's a good question, and I think it sort of is a thing that changes a bit. Because I produce currently so a lot of material and with a short time span, often. So I tend to have maybe favorite tunes that are pretty recent in a way, all the time, and when a few months pass, I produced some new material, and then it replaces the previous sort of favorites. So I think that I have.
What is the biggest one, perhaps? If you got something on your mind.
Well, from the past few years, I think that a tune called "The Journey Begins."
Journey Begins.
That's probably my favorite, because
why?
It was the first tune for me where I really wanted to try that. How epic can I sort of create and I've always also liked to listen to these sort of trailer music kind of project, like Two Steps from Hell or
very big one,
Audio Machine or really slow motion. Or so with The Journey Begins, I wanted to try that. Could I create something that gets close to that kind of epic orchestral thing? Because usually I use quite little of tracks and layers. But with that tune, I eventually ended up with 30 or something. So and for me, that's a big template already. And also the creation of that tune took maybe 10 or 15 hours, which is also pretty special for me, because I usually try to stay in the only a few hours or so. So it was a process that was kind of different for me, and I didn't really know that will it work and how it will all sound. And eventually I really like the end outcome. Of course, the mixing is something I really should learn how to do better, but still, even with that a bit muddy mix, I think that it's a tune that works in that concept. And eventually, that release I put that tune on was named after that tune. And I also got really inspired by this magnificent steampunk airship art by this.
You got in the you got in your music.
Yeah, Min Nguyen, and the image that I used in the cover art is basically what I think that tune sort of.
I like that tune. I listened it myself. You know, of course. After this stream, go and watch this CelestialAeon guy. He has a lot of tracks. Like I was even surprised how many he publishes. Like quite a lot. There was another question on. What music or composers are you currently listening to? And I think you answered some ones, but are those the ones that you're currently listening and really big fan of?
Yeah, I tend to have like some composers that to me are like eternal, that I always go back to. And of course Hans Zimmer, but I personally enjoy his a little bit unknown works, like Thin Red Line is an excellent soundtrack from him, and also Beyond Rangoon, which is also quite unknown, but it's an excellent as well. But then from Japan, I really like, for example, Joe Hisaishi, who has made all the Hayao Miyazaki films and
big
also
fan.
Kitano,
I'm big fan.
Kitano, yeah. And then from anime composers, there are like these older ones like Taku Iwasaki, who made excellent score for example, Samurai X or Rurouni Kenshin OVA, which I recommend checking out. Taku Iwasaki. And then Taro Iwashiro, who made, for example, Onimusha 2 and lots of other stuff. But for example,
Onimusha
2 is really good. But then Johan Johansson, who sadly passed away, did amazing stuff, and some of his concept albums that are outside of film works are beautiful. For example, Fordlandia. Johan Johansson's Fordlandia is one of my favorite albums. And what else?
So those kind of like I look at what you say, big broad kind of array of music. I would tell. So like you listen a lot of different kind of people and different kind of composers broadly.
Yeah, and actually one genre that maybe a bit surprisingly is really close to me is like,
and what is that?
This fusion jazz.
Fusion jazz. That's a big jump.
Jazz. So
how come?
One composer from that realm is Vince Mendoza.
Vince Mendoza. And what kind of music he does?
And especially, he is an excellent composer and conductor, and he actually, I think that he has like made orchestrations for Björk and maybe even Madonna. I'm not sure, but he
big names.
His own compositions where he combines orchestra with jazz. And for example, his album called Epiphany.
Epiphany?
It's a beautiful tune album with lots of orchestral tunes, but then a whole jazz orchestra as well, and playing together. And everything is like composed really beautifully and with modern touch. It's an excellent album. I like to listen to like over and over. And then of course Pat Metheny. Pat Metheny is like this guitar player who has created. He has worked with Pat Metheny Group, and he has released like these massive albums that.
What kind of music style? Did I miss that? What kind of music style?
Pat Metheny is also a jazz guitarist, but he also works on this kind of world music where he takes elements from different parts of world music and then combines that with jazz. And for example, Secret Story album from him is one of my favorites, and The Way Up also. So. But I
many different
like very different genres, and I think that I've always approached music with this kind of curiosity, that instead of like thinking that
I'm in jazz camp or in classical camp, yeah.
Or even thinking that why I don't like this music, I try to think that what could I enjoy in this music? So sort of like approaching different genres with open mind and then finding something that like elates to you instead of like just turning away and thinking that I don't touch that genre at all. So it's an attitude thing as well.
I see. So like, is it that like you mentioned many artists, many different people. People have a they can go and check those out. A lot of listening in there to see what kind of musicscape, what kind of songs have you listened. But I think that's a good kind of like where you mentioned that. Perhaps it's limiting yourself if you just put yourself in kind of like this one group. I think that was what were you mentioning. I think very good advice. Before, like, I have to there are many questions coming. We have to unfortunately go to the next one. Of course, if it's something that connects to the other question, we can have to go back to it because there might be some very good ones that you have in mind. But there's still one big question from Zer33 about. I wonder, do you get asked if you can make music for stuff? How often? What makes you accept, reject it? I think he's mentioning about, music composing project like a commissions. And how do you feel if you have when you hear it and hear it with the other, when you hear it with the work of the other creator? I suppose it's kind of like perhaps collaborations or kind of like these kind of commissions, perhaps making music for games and such. What kind of opportunities have you had on that, and how would you answer that question?
Yeah, so far I've sort of like tried to steer away from commissions because
really?
For me the main aspect of music creation is sort of like the freedom that comes with it when you just have your own studio and you can do whatever you want whenever you want. And in many ways, always when you pick up some project that somebody is ordering from you, you basically lose the freedom, or at least usually there are projects that like
people sign contracts and stuff.
But specs that.
Oh, just the one question. Sorry, I'm somebody.
2 seconds.
Just a moment.
And you have to have like a build up at 52 seconds or whatever. And then when you finally manage to do that, then the exchanges that actually it's only 1 minute and 20 seconds. And
so you mentioned like this kind of difficulties in kind of commission. So much I've done it myself. That's like the main thing. Like it depends so much on the people who ask the commission. Some might be jerk and some might be good guy. I think that's what you mentioned.
Yeah, but even good guys, sometimes just changes happen because it can be that the project changes and they really need a different tune, and they can't help it. So I think that it's inherently a problematic thing that when you try to make music to somebody else with somebody else's specs, even if they are good guys, it means that you lose freedom and you get deadlines.
Yeah,
and for
I
me,
get you.
That's the stress. And for me, I want to keep my music creation as far from stress as possible. And hence, I've decided so far that I very rarely even look for commissions. And I just focus on creating whatever I want whenever I want.
That is interesting because so for some people who make commissions, for me, like I do it for the money's sake in a sense that I've been able to get my work on that. But like I do get what you say on the stress. It is very stressful because you have to get on the mind of that person. You have to kind of trying to figure out what he wants to have. I definitely get that kind of vibe on what you say on that, and I think that answered perhaps the question on how people think when you collaborate. But are you perhaps thinking of doing that in the future?
Well, we'll see. I think that it's always down to the project and the sort of like the reality that I probably would like to go to project that allow me that sort of certain amount of freedom that I really require for me to be like happy and fun. So I think it's just always a prospect, but I'm not sure how often I could run into a project that would be so free. So
I
I'm not
get
sure
you.
if it's realistic, but yeah.
I get what you. Oh, sorry. Well, we have some kind of like. Okay, now we got some. Okay, so the thing is that we have still few questions. I think you answered on that very well. Some people might prefer commission. Some people might not. There are some people asking about. I personally love music. He says, crazy artist. The artist says, when you make a piece of music, does your imagination drown in every note and the sound of the music? And then he continues, or she continues, I personally love music, but I do art, so the music inspired me to do so. So I was wondering if a composer feels the same amount of passion when the listening the music as perhaps like the making of music. I think that's her point. But how would you answer on that? Like when you make the piece of music, how does the imagination go on the note, or what's the process on that?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's the universal question of creation and art. And for me, it changes based on the moment or occasion, because sometimes I get like this really strong impulse to just create something specific that comes from inside. And then I usually create a tune that is more personal and more like intense, and the experience is more intense, because then I feel that I'm creating something that I have to create because it just like comes there.
And it just works.
But yeah, but that's not like typical. Usually it's more like just like that I decide that now I compose this and I
and then it
make
just
it like
works.
it, and then it's more like a work in a sense.
So it's
But
not like a
always
lightning
you have
coming from the sky and just hitting you and
no.
music.
I don't believe that I have to sort of like wait for the inspiration to hit, because then I would rarely get anything done. I'm more like a guy that even if I don't have that powerful inspiration, I still want to create. And then it's just a bit different experience. But there is always a little bit of that, like that when I'm playing like some kind of melody line, I get these feelings of, hey, this is actually like, but it still doesn't feel like I'm like doing something like phenomenal.
I get
But
what you say.
it's I don't think that it's like an on-off thing. I think it's more like a scale, and sometimes you are like really far to that existential like creation thing, but sometimes you're like there. So
Sometimes it works, sometimes it does not work like that. Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
yeah. I think that answers it. There have been people asking your questions, many like Sir Tristan, crazy artist, Datovda saying hello, and Blue Snelek from Twitch. Hello, Blue Snelek. There's still one question I think. There's some from Sir about. I have not listened to Matti's music yet, but do you ever think of trying something you don't make that much? As example, from what I heard, like you make fantasy music, so maybe you want to make dark, macabre music or themed music. How do you answer that?
Yeah, it's always like a constant thing that I want to do, that I want to create something that I haven't done yet. And I think that that's also something I did back in the stock-free music kind of thing, that I just decided that, okay, I want to try dubstep. So maybe not something that extreme, but
Bit extreme.
I always have like this idea of maybe starting another music project with another name that focuses on some genre or style that I'm not currently on, and then seeing how it goes. But within the CelestialAeon project concept, I try to stay in a certain style, so that if fans or followers get a new release notification, they wouldn't feel that I'm suddenly doing something totally
Changing
out there.
completely to something else, because they subscribe to your fantasy music.
I think that there is point to like focusing on certain kind of atmosphere and style with single artist names. So, but in future, I think that I might be like broadening my musical options by starting different artist names. And I currently have a few. They're not like
What
that,
names? Can you say them?
Well, Frozen Silence is my sort of like
Frozen
only piano
Silence.
kind of contemporary classical project. And then I have like this more electronic ambient project called project Divinity. And
I've
I
seen
think
that, yeah.
on Spotify, you might see those when you look at CelestialAeon project, like the tab that shows other artists. They probably show there.
I see.
But they are not like that big, and I haven't published.
You're still building them, I suppose.
Yeah, I every now and then try to like release something for them as well. But here we once again end up with the time aspect that
of course.
Currently I feel that
so you'll work. So you like work full time on coding, and still you make music and other these kind of things.
Well, actually now I'm trying to take down my programming time and try to raise my music time and see how it goes. So
really?
I'm in the middle of some kind of transition, maybe that I'm
full-time composer, maybe.
Maybe, yeah, maybe we'll see. But yeah, it's an interesting point in my career, so to speak.